All right, hi everyone, we're back and we're getting ready to start our next session. We'd like to introduce our client spotlight with the New York City Department of Education, Anthony Benners. Samantha is going to introduce him and then we're going to start his slides. Thanks everyone.
Okay, so we can pop into the webinar now. So let's hit the button.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We're excited to introduce our next speaker, our client spotlight with the New York City Department of Education. And today we have Anthony Benners with us. So Dr. G. Anthony Benners serves as the Senior Psychometrician and Innovation Advisor for the New York City Department of Education, where he leads research and adoption of assessment innovations in test design, scoring, and technology, and advises on the quality of content, psychometrics, accommodations, security, and administration of educational assessment programs to support effective teaching and learning in New York City public schools. To promote the adoption of modern educational technology and data systems, as well as the teaching of digital literacy, Dr. Benners has been a tireless champion of the digital transition of the NYCDOE assessment programs to help foster global competence among youth in the culturally diverse global city that is New York. Dr. Benners has worked to enhance NYCDOE's World Language Examination program, taken annually by over 40,000 students in 20+ world languages. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to turn over to Anthony now to get started.
Thank you so much, and really an honor to be sharing with colleagues here some strategies for using TAO in New York City for our world language program. So I want to share my screen with you and pull up the slides. Great. So hopefully you're seeing my screen now. And as you see, the title, Strategy for Using TAO to Support New York City World Language Assessments, I want to share the flow of presentation in just a moment so I can. Okay, so the flow of presentation, we're going to cover some background context. Here, I want to share a bit about New York City Department of Education and the current world language exam program. Share also some new developments that we have here in New York City, as well as the state, where we are implementing new teaching and learning standards for world languages, as well as talk about some of the strategies that we're using here in New York City as those new standards are being implemented within classrooms. So a bit about New York City. I'm sure I don't need to share much detail given New York City's footprint in the world, but we are a very linguistically diverse city. And we do see ourselves as being very innovation driven. So some facts, of course, about New York City is we are home of the United Nations, as well as a global center for many different industries. Being a largely immigrant city, we do have a multilingual workforce. And our school system is actually the largest in the United States, comprising of 32 community school districts, serving 1.1 million students, over 75,000 teachers across 1,800 schools. And as I said, very diverse set of student demographics. The families that send their students to New York City public schools speak over 180 different languages. And so we have a very robust world language exam program to support our students who are both, many of them native language speakers, as well as those who are learning languages as a second language. So here you can see that we have a number of different languages that we develop exams for. The languages that are listed on the right here are ones where our team internally at the DOE develop the exams with our world language educators. So we get together with about 40 to 50 different world language educators, and we develop these exams for our students. And you see on the left just a description of the format of those exams. So there are 4 skills that are being assessed: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And each of these skills are a different section of the exams. They have been, up until a few years ago, all delivered on paper. And you can see, particularly for parts 2 and 3, mostly multiple choice. For the writing section, given on paper, students had been, writing by hand these short responses, about 100 words or so for 2 different prompts. And then for the speaking section, that has been a one-to-one conversation between the student and the teacher. In 2001, New York State Department of Education adopted revised standards for teaching and learning of world languages across the state. And you can see here the timeline of implementation of those standards within classrooms. So starting as early as September 2023, all of our 7th graders across the city and the state are expected to be given instruction if they're in a world language course, whether it's Spanish, Chinese, that language course, they're expected to be taught according to the new standards. And then for each subsequent year, those students will continue to be taught, and then it'll be phased in that everyone by 2028, if they're in a world language course, they will be taught according to these new world language standards. So with those new standards come new assessments. And we have to use the standards as a framework for what those new assessments would look like. So here are 3 key shifts in those New York State next generation world language standards. First of all, they're pulling from these proficiency frameworks that go beyond just what we expect students to be able to do within New York State. They're tying to these national and international frameworks for language learning and teaching. Secondly, there's a big emphasis in these new standards on purpose and context. So we want students to not just be, linguists and understand the language from a conceptual point of view. We want them to be able to use the language. And so to be able to use the language, we have to ensure that our teachers are embedding in instruction realistic, authentic materials, and setting up scenarios for students to really think about how they would use the language outside of the classroom. So how do we generate transfer of those skills in using the language beyond the confines of the classroom? And then finally, a huge shift is digital literacy. We know that we're living in a world where everyone is digitally connected. And what's beautiful about that in world language learning and teaching is that there's so many resources online. A student here in the Bronx, Brooklyn, in New York City, they can transport themselves across the world, anywhere, Shanghai, London, you name it, and they can interact with others through modern technical communication technology. So we're very excited about this opportunity to revisit and redefine our own assessments. And given those shifts, we're looking at digital world language exams to be the future for our students. And so what are the strategies we can use in taking advantage of TAO as this open source assessment system? There have been 3 models that we've been considering as we plan out our roadmap for implementation of digital world language exams. So one is called the SAMR model. And here the idea is that, particularly for education, we understand that huge changes and huge shifts may get a lot of pushback from educators. We understand that educators need time and professional development in order for changes to happen and to be implemented in the classroom. And so the SAML model suggests that a good strategy would be to start with introducing the technology as a simple substitution, and then gradually enhance and add functionality to the technology as the users get used to the new technology. So that's one of the models that we're looking as we plan out the roadmap ahead for the implementation of digital world language exams. Also, we're really keen on this idea of design thinking and putting forward prototypes for educators to explore with in a very low stakes way to get their hands dirty with and to again get that feedback through this iterative cycle of design thinking. So we've incorporated that as well in our roadmap over the next few years. And then finally, the third model is this idea of lead user innovation. So we know that educators are in different places across the city in terms of their familiarity with technology, their eagerness and readiness to take on even more change, right? And so if you look at that SAMR model, right, there may be some educators who are ready for the transformation, the modification, the redefinition of the assessments, whereas others are really looking just for that substitution and the slower gradual change. So if we can identify who those lead users are that are ready to take on the more dramatic change, then working with them to get feedback and work out the kinks, we believe is a good strategy for this digital transformation. So here's an example of how we would look to use the SAMR model. So with substitution, again, a large part of the assessment is multiple choice. And so the substitution is rather than students bubbling in on an answer document, they're selecting a radio button on the screen. So that's not a huge transformation, it's a substitution, but it's one we're confident that their educators and students will be comfortable with to start. What might be considered more of an augmentation step is going from handwriting essays to typing essays. And so we're going to be providing a lot of professional development and opportunities to practice as students get comfortable in typing in, again, a second language for many of these students, or even for first language heritage speakers. They may not necessarily have the keyboarding skills right away, And so building in that professional development and practice opportunity will be key. And then as we get feedback, who knows what the modification and redefinition stages might be, but we have some ideas of what that might look like. And we're looking forward to hearing from our educators as we explore various prototypes. So again, the design thinking framework as a strategy, back in 2018, we did what we call a digital demonstration project, where we offered for all of our Chinese language classrooms an opportunity to practice taking digital world language exams, digital Chinese exams on the computer. And so we put together, using TAO, a prototype of our exams, and that was a real success. We got great feedback, and it was a fantastic way to introduce digital world language exams to our schools. With the lead user, again, the idea is we want to identify who are those educators who are really ready for that next level, and gathering that feedback, working with them in smaller groups. And one of the inspirations I have for this is mountain biking. If you look at mountain biking, it's now a multi-billion-dollar industry, but the history of it was that it was just a bunch of folks getting together with some standard bikes, going up a mountain and having fun going down it, right? And then several of them were tinkering with the design of the bikes. There was competition involved, who could go down the fastest with the most control. And so now we have this huge industry in mountain biking that was born out of these lead users working together to innovate. So we're very excited about this idea of identifying our lead users. What is next beyond multiple choice? Well, we're very excited about the technology enhanced items that TAO offers. Drag and drop, hotspot, graphical interactions are very exciting. We're also inspired by scenario-based performance tasks, this idea of walking students through a scenario with avatars and real purpose and context. Again, going back to the shift in the standards, how can we put students as they're taking the examination into the mindset of, oh, I'm out there, I'm using the language, I'm in a train station, I need to find out where I'm going. I need to ask someone, where the bathroom is, those kinds of scenarios, and how can we use the technology to really put the student in that mindset. So for 2022-23 school year, that's next school year, these are the things that we're looking to do. Again, using those frameworks and models for transformation. We want to offer all of our middle school Spanish students an opportunity to take practice tests similar to what we did in 2018 with TAO. We're going to use TAO as well for a larger implementation, because as you saw the numbers, there's many more Spanish students taking Spanish classes, and so that'll be an expansion of this digital demonstration project. We also, again, with this idea of phasing in at lower stakes, we have a number of lower incident languages that are rarely, if at all, taught. It's mostly students who are using the language at home. It's their home language. And so the pass rates for that for those exams are very high. So this is an opportunity to introduce a digital version for students who are much more proficient in the language, and they can get comfortable with that format as we roll it out. We also do, again, want to look for our lead users and do operational pilots next year, particularly for our Spanish 8th grade exam. And then finally, we want to look to any third-party exams that we might introduce that are prototypes of the types of changes. And so there are a few languages where we've identified third-party assessments that are digital, that have technology-enhanced items that we can introduce to teachers as we build out our own in-house exams for the higher incident languages. So I see we're just about at time, but I did want to share my contact information in case folks want to continue the conversation. If you have ideas on how we can build out our community for open source assessment technology, and particularly around the assessment of world languages, we would love to hear from you and kick off that conversation.